prehistoric man must have been both overwhelmed and astonished by the wonders of their environment. Unable to fathom the whys, it is no wonder that the incomprehensible would be explained with the imperceptible. The history of humanity is rich of cultures that relied on supernatural assistance for issues as diverse as finding prey or promoting fertility, to explaining thunder and lightning and even the recurring sunrise. Hi, my name is, well, just call me John the Prophet. I am a scientist by profession, but I'm also an avid lifelong enthusiast and observer of scientific progress. As such, I'm particularly interested in the apparent conflict between science and religion, which remains very noticeable in the media. Actions perpetrated by fanatical followers of the major religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and even Buddhism, occupy the attention of mainstream media on a daily basis. This video begins a series of investigations on selected topics that are frequent themes in the ongoing debate between secular and religious forces in society. Delivery of information has been revolutionized in the last 15 years or so, rendering it far easier for people to keep abreast of events. One would surmise this flood of information would lead to more accurate reporting, but in fact, it appears to have resulted in a greater amount of misinformation and one-sided reporting than ever before. There are even examples of cable television stations that pretend to offer legitimate news, but really serve as mouthpieces for political ideology. The best known of these is the Fox News channel. According to its many critics, in principle, it serves the Republican Party the same way as the newspaper Pravda served the Russian Communist Party, all through Stalin's regime until the collapse of the former Soviet Union.
All roads lead to San Francisco as the Republican National Convention opens with Chairman Joe Martin.
It is ironic that the one group of people whose anger against the evils of the former Soviet Union reverberated the loudest and longest has now adopted one of its primary propaganda methods. One can find endless examples of misinformation intended to serve various agendas, all but preventing constructive debate from taking place. As an example, here is a website claiming the universe is about 6,000 years old, based on the cumulative age of characters in the Christian Bible. Logically, this is akin to adding up the height of those same characters and claiming the sum equals the size of the universe, or adding their weight to determine its total mass. Here is another website promoting a geocentric universe, an idea originating in religion and also abandoned centuries ago by the scientific community for no other reason than it was found to be false. Here is a third website claiming the Earth is hollow. While not limited to any specific religion, this peculiar belief asserts that practically any strange idea invented by man, of course unsupported by evidence, can be found inside the Earth. The Garden of Eden, the land of the lost tribes of Israel, the kingdom of God, the Vikings who disappeared from Greenland, vanquished German Nazis, and even UFOs can all be found in there. Skeptics quip that anything lost is to be found in there, except of course reason. When asked for evidence to support such ideas, the proponents often engage in denialism of scientific approaches, while claiming a plethora of evidence. In fact, they would happily provide it had it not been deliberately hidden or misinterpreted in a massive conspiracy by government agencies and the scientific community as a whole. When said agencies and scientists reject such claims, this only reinforces the proponents' beliefs. For the believers, the absence of evidence is the evidence. Amazingly, millions of people are convinced these incredible ideas are true. A predominant factor among believers appears to be a nebulous understanding of what constitutes reality and imagination, although they would be hard-pressed to admit to that. Ignorance of what scientific inquiry is all about, coupled with an innate inclination to align ideas with the way we view the world, begets credulity, a willingness to believe just about anything without requiring evidence to support it. All of this spurs many questions. How does one counter such misinformation? Don't people have the right to believe what they want? Don't they have the right to promote whatever they want, whether on websites or in print? Are we closing our minds when we reject ideas because they lack evidence? Or are we simply being rational? Simply said, not all ideas are equal. Claiming I will fly if I flap my hands does not warrant the same respect as claiming I can power an entire city using atomic energy. The difficulty is always in striking the right balance between gullibility and narrow-mindedness. The definition of terms is imperative to all debates. In the absence of proper definition, concepts and terms quickly become meaningless. If you and I are debating an issue and you use a word like real or rational in a different manner than I do, it is unlikely we'll reach a consensus. Our debate becomes pointless. It is the purpose of this first video to clarify a number of terms that will be used in later videos in a manner consistent with widely accepted dictionaries and definitions by academia. This is done in an attempt to provide simple definitions that yet hold up to the rigors of academics. And what better topic to make this point than to discuss the use of the aforementioned words, real and rational, and compare their intended meaning with the one used by many Christians when referring to Jesus or their faith. Humans are a curious animal. They seek answers to all experiences and observations. At times there have been few answers, but curiosity is a driving force. When explanations were not forthcoming, our ancestors quenched their curiosity by other means. They invented answers. Surely an invented answer is better than no answer at all. A part of fabricating answers was the use of gods to explain natural phenomena. Compared to the constraints of our ancestors' limited knowledge, the modern man lives in enviable times. Today, we have the answer to almost any question they asked. But we also have new questions they could not even have imagined. But not all explanations are equal. Some explanations are solely based on our direct interaction with and understanding of reality. They are reality-based. The remainder of them, obviously, is not. Since the concept of imaginary refers to anything that is not real, it follows that those explanations are, well, based on the imagination. Explanations that are part reality and part imagination can also be classified as imaginary. Suppose you're walking in the woods when you hear a sound whose origin is uncertain to you. If you explain the source as two tree branches rubbing against each other, you are providing a reality-based explanation. If you contend it was caused by the abominable Sasquatch, the explanation is imaginary, even though the sound itself is a part of reality. Such explanations are the consequence of inconsistent logic or poor formulation. In this context, ideas are the construct of our imagination, but things and objects are a part of reality. But this begs the question, where does reality meet the imagination? What is reality? The late science fiction writer Philip K. Dick, who some may recognize as the author behind famous movies such as Blade Runner, Total Recall, and Minority Report, is credited with saying, "Reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away." While an interesting perspective, the concept of reality cannot be discussed without involving the science of modern neurology. Today, neurological research reveals that the mind and the self are created inside our brains, and its operation is entirely the consequence of chemical reactions that take place within it. Just consider the following question. Where do you feel your mind is located? Is it in your left knee? No? In your right hand? Stomach or heart? No, we can clearly feel that our minds are located between our ears and behind our eyes, inside the brain. And that's where we're headed next. It is convenient to split our experience of the world into a mental world and a physical world. The mental world is entirely a construct of our brains, whereas the physical world is not. The physical world is nature. It is reality. The mental world comprises what can be called the sense of imagination. It is where our experience of the physical world meets our thoughts and imagination. Other than that, the physical world is altogether independent of, and mostly unaware of us. When we die, reality will continue to exist. It is only our mental worlds that have ceased to exist. The sense of imagination and the function of the brain are far too complex to discuss here. It is better left to scientists in the field to describe its details. For humans, it is the source of our greatest inventions, our most magnificent art, and our proclivity towards war and peace. It is also the source of emotions we share with other animals, such as love and hate, generosity and jealousy, joy and lack thereof, to name a few. All imagination, remembering, thinking, and self-awareness takes place inside our brains and, as stated earlier, is driven by chemical reactions. In fact, they are the reason why drugs can be used to control various mental disorders. Upon death, these chemical reactions cease, and consequently the sense of imagination comes to an end. It is the end of us. There is simply no compelling evidence to suggest otherwise. Conversely, religions will argue that once we die, the sense of imagination will take off, unscathed, and go to, well, some other place. There is a number of problems with this view, of which only two will be brought up here. First, people who suffer brain damage lose both brain functionality and memory, and their sense of imagination is therefore seriously impaired. This shows that a healthy brain is required for those functions to exist. The hypothesis that the soul can survive the death of the brain demands the sense of imagination to be unaffected by brain damage. But this is not the case. It is therefore handily rejected by the evidence. Second, when alive, energy was required to run the sense of imagination, and this was provided by the aforementioned chemical reactions. It follows that if it took energy to sustain the sense of imagination when alive, sustaining it after death should also require energy. But where does that energy come from, and what sustains it? Claiming that all of a sudden energy is not required, or that the soul has joined some kind of a New Age ethereal field, is simply an irrational cop-out answer and is not acceptable. Such fields are only a fantasy, and there is absolutely no evidence to suggest their existence. Religions never explain how the sense of imagination can be sustained after death, or the mechanics of its sustenance. And why don't they? Because they have no explanation. The idea of life after death is really a figment of the imagination. And while comforting to many, there is simply no convincing evidence to support it.
Well, Ebenezer Scrooge, for only you can see me.
What do you want with me?
All the so-called evidence provided to date, such as near-death experiences, seances, ghosts and poltergeists, can all be explained as psychological manifestations, if not outright frauds. Therefore, the idea must be taken on faith. The demise of the sense of imagination is a provocative thought, but only to those who persist in a world of pretense. To others, it serves as an impetus to live life to the fullest and bring about happiness to the best of one's ability. This, after all, may be the only life we have. One's primary obligation in life should be to live it wisely. The mental world is connected to the physical world via the 5 classical sensory organs attributed to Aristotle: vision, hearing, touching, and so on. Modern-day neurologists consider additional senses such as the sense of pain, sense of acceleration, sense of balance, and others, here simply classified as etc. Their sensory signals are transmitted by nerves for processing in the brain, enabling us to construct an image or sense of reality. In this context, the sense of reality is a subset of the sense of imagination, and the successful survival in the physical world requires a sophisticated interaction between the two. For instance, to imagine the long fall to the bottom of the canyon improves one's chances of survival by encouraging careful behavior near its edge. There is indeed a sharp line dividing the two worlds, which can be seen from the fact that when we die, we do not take a part of reality with us. Reality remains intact, but we, as individuals, ultimately disappear from it. This can be taken to mean that the two worlds are separate and independent of each other. This way, the physical world has been around for a long time, perhaps some 14 billion years, but our mental worlds begin and end with us. As mentioned before, the separation of worlds requires experiences that originate in the physical world to be detected with some sensory signals, which in turn means they are natural. Experiences without such signals can be argued to originate in the sense of imagination. In other words, they are imaginations. Some experiences of the imagination are powerful enough to direct signals toward the physical world, but they are still caused by the sense of imagination. We can modify the inputs from the physical world to the brain using both chemicals and mechanical means. This fact is used during anesthesia, when administration of drugs effectively prevents sensory signals from reaching the brain. It is also possible to modify the activity of the imagination, as happens when people use hallucinogenic drugs. Also, we can modify one sensory signal at a time. We can modify vision using glasses. This allows us to correct a previously flawed sensory signal, in turn making our sense of reality better match reality. Signals arriving from the physical world have a powerful effect on the sense of imagination, as can be observed by placing one's hand near a heat source like fire. However, as mentioned earlier, it can be argued that such signals also travel in the opposite direction, from the sense of imagination to the physical world, although it packs far less power. An example of an experience that is strong enough to generate such signals is to imagine one's child in danger. This can spur anxiety, cause perspiration and nervousness. Of course, this doesn't mean our child is in danger. It is just a physical reaction resulting from an overactive imagination. Another example of overactive imagination are experiences some people have that involve spirits and ghosts. These can create feelings of fear that are powerful enough to cause the hair on one's back to rise, which is a common but ancient defense mechanism of mammals. Ultimately, such examples demonstrate clearly that just because one's reaction to an idea manifests itself in the physical world, whether in the form of anxiety or calmness, fear or courage, depression or elation, does not make the idea real. Such emotions are common consequences of sensory signals originating in the sense of imagination, whose effects are erroneously attributed to the physical world. In other words, they make people confuse imagination with reality. Beliefs are also a subset of the imagination, but differ in how they affect behavior in the physical world. As an example, we can imagine we have sprouted wings and can fly, but not until we actually believe it are we willing to go ahead and try it out, although we are in for a big disappointment if we try this out in reality by jumping from a building. The brain is also capable of distinguishing between each function, allowing us to separate reality from imagination, and imagination from beliefs. However, this capability is arguably underdeveloped in most people who frequently encounter difficulty separating reality from the imagination. Such difficulties appear more the norm than the exception, although experience shows it can be trained and our sense of reality improved. This understanding of the sense of reality and sense of imagination allows the concept of truth to be defined. Truth can be defined as that which is in agreement with reality. In other words, it is concepts and ideas that find their match in the physical world. The statement, "the car's color is gray," can be tested against our sensory organs and shown to be true or false. The idea that people who don't eat get hungry can similarly be tested to evaluate its truthfulness. The idea that people who don't worship Allah go to hell, on the other hand, has no agreement with reality, because both Allah and hell are imaginary concepts. No one has ever been observed going to hell, believing in Allah or not. In fact, the idea is neither true nor false, and this is its great problem. It is what is called unfalsifiable, a concept to be introduced later. When clergy threatens you with statements about heaven or hell, you should know they lie. They simply have no clue, because it is impossible for anybody to know. Thinking one knows does not mean one actually does. Claiming to possess such knowledge and present it under the pretense it is the truth shows an indescribable intellectual dishonesty and arrogance. It is but one example of many of how religions have taken the word truth hostage and abused it beyond recognition. Christians are prone to saying, Jesus is the truth. However, if I ask, what is the truth for 1 + 1? Even the most fundamentalist Christian has to admit, it is not Jesus. This shows the sillier side of how the word truth is being abused. It has lost its true meaning. Philosophers classify truth as objective or subjective. Objective truth is based on indisputable facts, whereas subjective truth is simply someone's opinion. It is an objective truth that the sun is what creates day and night. It is an objective truth that water runs downhill. And it is an objective truth that if animals don't consume food, they will die. Objective truth is true for everyone. It doesn't matter whether one is an atheist, Christian, Hindu or Muslim, libertarian or a communist, a lowly virus or a great ape, or anything in between or beyond. The aforementioned examples hold true for all of them. On the other hand, it is a subjective truth that blue is a prettier color than red, or that the movie The Revenge of Frankenstein is a good movie. These are just opinions.
But I have escaped the guillotine, and I shall avenge the death of my creation.
Now, it is possible that to me, The Revenge of Frankenstein is the greatest story ever told. To me, it might represent a vignette of a deep personal struggle braided with faith in the implausible that conveys the profoundly meaningful message of resurrection and everlasting life. However, I am sure you would readily volunteer that I should not expect that view to be held by everyone else. With that in mind, let's do some behavioral profiling. Should I become obsessed with convincing other people, sometimes forcefully, that they too should love the story like I do? Would that make me dogmatic? Dogmatism is not a virtue. As evidenced by the Crusades and the Spanish Inquisition, it can easily develop into a dangerous mental disorder. If I proudly declare the story of Frankenstein more important to me than my family, would that make me selfish? If I insist I can interpret the will of Frankenstein and want this interpretation to become a part of public policy, is it possible I'm opportunistic? If I claim the story is factually true and its characters really existed because the story says so, and refuse to ponder the possibility they may be fictitious, is it possible I'm delusional and irrational? If I loathe the fans of other stories of similar content because they not only refuse to recognize their stories are fictional, they firmly contend these describe real events, would that indicate I am illogical and irrational? If I revel in repeating the word Frankenstein and try to get it into every conversation I have, regardless of relevance, is it possible I suffer from an obsessive-compulsive disorder? Should my obsession with the story compel me to erect buildings to celebrate it, and travel the world to spread its message? Is it possible my dogmatism could be the symptom of an underlying mental illness?
You knew God called you when you were a young boy, right?
He called me when I was young, and it shocked me.
Yeah.
But I spent a lot of my life lonely.
Exactly. And the same with me. He called me, and I knew from the time when God called me on the soccer field that I had something inside of me that God wanted to deliver to other people.
If I claimed I heard Frankenstein's voice speaking to me inside my head, is it possible I have a touch of schizophrenia? Would I be well served by you telling me so?
We'll title this tape Planet Earth About to be Recycled. Your only chance to evacuate is to leave with us.
Marshall Applewhite and his followers in the Heaven's Gate cult believed in a doctrine that combined their Christian faith of salvation and apocalypse with New Age science fiction, particularly travel to other worlds and dimensions. By the spring of 1997, the members had convinced themselves the Earth was about to be recycled, and they had no choice but to leave as quickly as possible. Claiming that an alien spacecraft was trailing the visiting Hale-Bopp comet, Applewhite persuaded 38 of his followers to commit suicide so that their souls could enter the undetectable craft. To accomplish this, Mr. Applewhite not only had to both imagine and believe the said spacecraft existed, he also managed to convince his followers of the same. Is it possible Mr. Applewhite suffered from any of the aforementioned psychological disorders? Would he have disregarded those trying to intervene? What do you think? Do you think Mr. Applewhite may be looking at us at this moment, across space, deploring that we didn't follow his lead? Or is it possible he actually suffered from a serious mental disorder, which made it impossible for him to recognize that what he contended was real and true was nothing more than a figment of his imagination? Can you think of other individuals who suffer from the same disorder as well? I submit Mr. Applewhite's afflictions are common to those who fervently assert that Jesus is Lord, or that Muhammad was a prophet. Simply said, there is no more evidence to support either idea than there was to support the presence of Mr. Applewhite's spaceship. And none of the three ideas qualifies as anything more than opinions. An old teacher told me once, objective truth requires something far beyond bearded men in frocks, pitching ancient books and talks. One of the goals of religions is to convince people someone's opinion, typically that of clergy, is an objective truth.
I want you to start walking this way as they sing this song.
This is imperative in order to maintain control over people. In the pursuit of this goal, two things happen to those that accept the message. First are those who succumb to an uncontainable fanaticism and arrogant self-righteousness, and fail to recognize that what they push as an objective truth is nothing more than an opinion. Second, there are those who succumb to the level of mindless sheep, as they absorb opinions, as if they were an objective truth. It is my subjective truth that each reflects a dangerous psychological disorder that society should begin to focus on and try to remedy. One can only wonder how many wars could have been averted, how many people would have lived another day, and how many cultures would not have been annihilated had it not been for the serious disorder.
Your only chance to survive or evacuate is to leave with us, is to leave with us, with us, with us, with us.
The modern-day laptop computer provides interesting parallels to animals, such as humans. The first time it is turned on, electrical current begins to flow through its memory and central processing unit, its brain. This spark of electricity brings it to life, and once its operating system loads, it acquires a personality. Some would call it a soul. At first, it seems like a newborn, full of life and potential. Like an infant, the computer initially has very limited amount of information in its brain. In fact, both only have a few basic instincts. The child consumes food without instruction and displays an insatiable curiosity. The computer consumes data and presents its own form of curiosity by seeking more data. At this stage, neither has any knowledge of the past, and neither is privileged to what the present or future may bring. Both have to be educated on these. The laptop does this learning by acquiring data from an already existing bank of information residing on its hard disk drive. A child learns by acquiring data from a bank of information stored in schools and libraries and from its parents and peers. Other animals learn primarily from their parents and social groups. The laptop can be put into a sleep mode where its consumption of energy is considerably reduced. After waking up, it is ready for another bout of hard work, just like animals after completing a nap. Well, most animals. The laptop can even hibernate, during which energy consumption all but disappears, and both can be afflicted by viruses. Finally, when the plug is pulled out of the computer for the very last time, it becomes clear that electrical currents will never again flow inside its digital brain. The disappearance of electricity spells the demise of its personality, its operating system. Its soul has vanished. And at least from this point of view, it has now expired. Its hardware has become a lifeless bundle of material. When animals die, electrical currents will never again flow inside their brains either. And their bodies, too, become lifeless bundles of material. Isn't claiming one's soul somehow survives the death and goes to heaven a little bit like expecting the laptop's operating system to survive the death of the computer and go to some heaven for software? Astronomers have been looking to the heavens for centuries now, using equipment of unparalleled sophistication. Today they are able to pretty much view the entire spectrum of light, ranging from X-rays caused by quasars and black holes as they violently consume entire stars, to infrared light waves dating back to the origin of the universe itself. And they can view any type of light in between. This is important for two reasons. First, because light carries observable evidence about the physical world to us. Second, because believers have been telling us the heavens are the residence of the gods, but centuries of astronomical research has not turned up any evidence to support that idea. Religious people often say that God transcends the universe and is everywhere. If this is the case, then why haven't any gods ever been observed? What lies above us is the universe itself. It is full of stars, nebulae, galaxies, black holes, quasars, and dark energy. Aside from these, it is full of absolutely nothing. Astronomers even call the space between galaxies voids or supervoids. The universe is reality. It is the physical world our brains interact with by means of our sensory organs. And let's be clear about that, no physical evidence has ever been discovered that supports the existence of anyone's deity. If there was, we surely wouldn't be having this discussion. And those who quip the universe is a sign of God's existence are simply wrong. The universe is exactly as we should expect it to be, due to the mindless and faceless forces of nature. Nothing in nature looks like it was made by anything but nature. But let's focus on the contradiction. Can God simultaneously be everywhere and yet be impossible to see? The answer is indeed yes, but only if God is a construct of the imagination. And if God can't be seen, should we expect him to show up in other ways that can be detected and cannot be blamed on an overactive psychology? Consider this equation, which was discovered by Sir Isaac Newton and first appeared in his Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, or the Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy, in 1687. The equation states that force equals mass times acceleration. The power of this equation is altogether hidden by its simple appearance, for we have it to thank for our abilities to drive cars, fly airplanes, sail ships, launch rockets to space with satellites that, for instance, make our cell phone technology a reality, erect skyscrapers and bridges, understand the life cycles of the stars, orbits of the planets, to explaining the formation of entire galaxies, just to name a few. Those who resort to it on a daily basis can attest to it being one of the most, if not the most, ingenious discoveries of humanity. For some, it is one of the most beautiful products ever delivered by the imagination. But what is also worthy of consideration is that it, as well as every single of its millions of derivative forms, never contains any reference to God. And why? Because introducing God to it as a variable will do nothing but to confuse and clutter up. God is completely useless in it and will only get in the way. As a matter of fact, in the entire library of science, one will not find a single equation ever discovered that needed God to be introduced as a variable. Science has no use for gods. Let's face it, believers who have been telling us to look to the heavens for God are flat out wrong. There are simply no gods to be found in the heavens, at least no gods that are also a part of reality. Rational thinkers have known for centuries that the believers who point to the heavens as the residence of the gods are pointing at the wrong place, for the right place is their heads. Heaven and hell, gods and devils, and angels and demons, in fact, reside inside their heads, because these are the constructs of their imagination. They are not real. But this leads to the question, why is it so important for believers in the first place to pretend God and the devil and paradise and hell are a part of reality? Why can't they admit these are just constructs of their imagination? Isn't it because then it is no longer credible? After all, you only need to ask yourself, can I touch it, smell it, see it, hear it, taste it? And the inevitable answer is no, you cannot. When asked, clergy will often tell us the soul is not a part of reality. Isn't it a contradiction that the soul is not real, but somehow paradise is? What better example to demonstrate how confused people are about reality and the imagination? This is a problem of definition. For millennia, clergy has been providing false, misleading, and contradictory portrayal of reality, and it is time we all get real about the imagination. The science of neurology ought to drive those pondering self-destruction for political and religious reasons to reconsider those intentions. There are no 72 virgins waiting to be had, and there is no everlasting bliss with one's favorite deity or deceased family members. It is all wishful thinking construed to mislead. Don't be fooled by the religious leaders. They tend to make outrageous claims that have no basis in reality. It is easy for them to make lofty promises. They know they don't have to keep them. After all, the believer is dead. For this reason, anything can be promised, and they do so continuously. Scientific inquiry indicates that once we die, that is it. What follows death is absolutely nothing, at least for the person that dies. The experience of dozing off, without dreaming, is common to all of us. We have all woken up in disbelief that we actually fell asleep, just to realize an hour or two may have passed. Then we recognize that during that period we had neither sense of imagination nor reality, not to mention time, and we sensed neither pleasure nor pain. We sensed nothing. Our consciousness was turned off for that period. It is as if the 2 hours were forever stripped from our experience. Perhaps death is like that, except it lasts forever. it would match the non-existence of our consciousness before birth. This way, we come into existence when the neurons in our brains have developed enough for the consciousness to form, and then go out of existence when we die. In fact, this is a far likelier scenario than the wishful-driven make-believe coming from the direction of clergy. With this in mind, blowing oneself to pieces on the premise of everlasting bliss seems like a raw deal. Suppose you're talking to a friend about a common acquaintance of yours, Luke, when your friend says, "Luke is a shoplifter. I saw him put something in his pocket at the grocery store and I don't believe he paid for it." Aside from any emotion this might invoke, you immediately realize that not only has an assertion been made, and it is either true or false, you have to decide which one to believe. As troubling as the assertion may be, it at least comes with a very important property. It is constructed in a fashion that allows its truthfulness to be evaluated. Not all statements have this property. People make all kinds of assertions every minute of every day that cannot be shown to be true or false. An example is a statement like, "There is a population of red-eyed, green-colored aliens living on the dark side of the moon." The importance of this property can be seen in its ability to separate assertions based on reality from ones based on the imagination. In fact, the property is so remarkable it has been given a special name, falsifiability. Without it, anything goes. With it, we can actually make sense of the world in which we live. The entire endeavor of science is founded upon falsifiability, and thanks to it, we have a way of replacing explanations based on the imagination with ones based on reality. An example of an explanation that contrasts reality and the imagination is the cause of thunder and lightning. Teutonic religions, driven by a vivid imagination, explained the phenomena as the god Thor angrily slamming his hammer Mjolnir against an anvil. The thunder is the sound of metal hitting metal, but the lightning is the spark it creates. In science, the explanation is reality-based. The lightning is the release of electrical charge produced in a rain cloud. The thunder is generated when the heat of the lightning causes the surrounding air to expand rapidly as it travels through it. Which one do you subscribe to? They can't both be true. Experience of the last few centuries shows that explanations based on reality are far more lasting. The vast number of explanations based on the imagination has already been replaced with ones based on reality. Examples of the opposite are hard to find. For instance, a statement like "the movement of the sunflowers is caused by the wind" is falsifiable, because we can directly measure the movement of air and therefore demonstrate whether it is, or is not, the cause. A statement like "the movement of the sunflowers is caused by the tango of the flower fairies" is not falsifiable, because flower fairies are imaginary and therefore cannot be detected by any of our sensory organs. Consequently, we are unable to confirm whether they are dancing, let alone whether it is tango, or polka, or cha-cha. It is for such reasons that only statements that refer to reality can be made falsifiable, because only in reality can we resort to at least one of our senses to confirm their truthfulness. Statements about imaginary ideas cannot be confirmed. They are unfalsifiable. As mentioned earlier, falsifiability is the secret behind all established sciences, and the reason why science only addresses natural phenomena. The problem with answers based on the imagination is that they tend to depend on when, where, and who you ask. Consequently, they lead to multiple answers rather than a single one. Which of those is true, and how can we know for sure? The problem is compounded when the bearer of various truths claims his idea to be based on reality, when in fact, it is not. Who can you trust then? Some 200 years ago, a pagan, a Christian, and a Hindu would have given you an assortment of imaginary explanations about the cause of thunder and lightning. Ask the question today, and all three will probably give you the reality-based explanation given by science. Ask them a spiritual question, that is, a question whose answer is based on the imagination, and you are bound to get three different answers. As we have seen, a large number of people are capable of convincing others that the products of their imagination are true as defined earlier. Doing so is to claim the idea to be a part of reality. This is referred to as misleading or deluding someone. Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines delusion as something that is falsely or delusively believed or propagated, and a persistent false psychotic belief regarding the self, or persons, or objects outside the self, that is maintained despite indisputable evidence to the contrary. Things that can be sensed with our sensory organs are real. Your car, books, flowers, your Uncle Chuck. Things that cannot be sensed with our sensory organs are imaginary. Your dreams, the big villa in Spain, the yacht. They are ideas or products of one's imagination. Delusion happens when someone believes his idea to be real. As a consequence, the person is unable to distinguish between reality and the imagination. For example, someone may be convinced the god Thor is real and insist he actually exists. While acknowledging that Thor could not exactly be seen, this person would probably tell you that his presence could be felt. "He is all around us," he would say. "You just have to open your mind to feel him." This person would be flunking the reality test. Things that are in our minds are not real. They are imaginary. If you cannot actually see or touch Thor, he is not real, but imaginary. Our friend would probably respond with, "But I actually tremble and perspire when I think about Thor, and I feel deep happiness in my heart. This wouldn't happen if it wasn't real." False. You're confusing the direction of the sensory signals, which are transferring your emotions to the physical world, but they still originate inside your sense of imagination. He might then foolishly quip with, "Well, my nephew is vacationing in Turkey, so I can't see or touch him, so I guess he is not real, huh?" No. He is real, and you can see him and touch him, just not at this very moment. Your grandfather, who died 10 years ago, on the other hand, used to be real, but is not so anymore. The molecules he used to consist of have by now either been recycled or are in the process of being recycled. Now he is just in the sense of imagination. Most people would have no difficulties in calling our friend delusional. However, many of those very same people would fail to recognize that their own beliefs are just as delusional, only the name of their god is different. What is really the difference between believing that Thor is real and he exists, or that Jesus is real and he exists? We know that Thor is discussed in the Prose Edda and Jesus in the Gospels in the Bible. The Prose Edda was written in the 10th century, the Gospels in the late 1st century. Both characters are claimed to be superhuman, and according to the believers, both live in the sky. Clearly, there are many differences too, but there are also more similarities than depicted here. But what about those makes one more believable than the other? So what is the real difference? Their names? Or just that you choose to believe one is real and not the other? The bottom line is that to a Christian, the pagan is delusional. To a pagan, the Christian is delusional. And to anyone else, both are delusional. You may ask, it appears you're saying that by believing Jesus was real and that he existed, you're accusing me of being delusional. So what about, say, Julius Caesar? I can just as well claim that Caesar never existed and people who believe he did are delusional, right? This is a popular argument presented in various forms among Christians. Its purpose seems to be to convince people that the absence of evidence for Jesus' existence is not to be interpreted as evidence of absence. In other words, Christians don't want us to reach the conclusion that the reason why there is no physical evidence for Jesus is that he never existed. This rather simplistic argument is easily deflated by pointing out that no one ever claimed Caesar was anything but an ordinary person. Jesus is not considered an ordinary person. No one ever claimed Caesar was a god who lives in the sky, unlike Jesus. No one ever claimed Caesar was a miracle worker, unlike Jesus. Additionally, it is an indisputable fact that the existence of Caesar is supported by a number of independent and contemporary documents. His own war commentaries, letters and speeches by his political rival Cicero, as well as numerous contemporary historians whose presentation compares well with other sources. Again, unlike Jesus. Further support comes from the fact that Caesar, in the might of his position, actually had coins made carrying his name. Coins engraved with Jesus' name dating back to the 1st century, or for that matter any other indisputable physical evidence of his existence, has never been found. These reasons render it rational to believe that Caesar was a real person, and he actually existed, and to doubt that Jesus ever did. Furthermore, unlike the case with Jesus, we don't see missionaries torturing and killing people because they don't believe Caesar existed. If you choose to believe he didn't exist, so what? Nobody cares. When looking closer at the evidence for Jesus, one discovers it is not exactly impressive. The Gospels that tell his story were all written long after his alleged death, as were all other sources: Josephus Flavius, Pliny the Younger, Tacitus, and the Talmud. Those sources are rejected by most serious biblical scholars as forgeries, or after the fact. Additionally, the Gospels contradict each other, especially on the resurrection, and can be rejected as hearsay. From a scientific standpoint, it doesn't even qualify as evidence. The important point is that there are no contemporary sources that mention Jesus. We have strong evidence to support that the existence of Caesar is a fact, but the same does not hold for the existence of Jesus. That's why he is a matter of faith, just like Thor. This chapter focused on what contemporary science has to say about reality and the imagination. Our experience of the world can be considered as either real or imaginary. They cannot be both. Reality-based experiences are accompanied by sensory signals that originate in the physical world. Imaginary experiences are not accompanied by such signals, even if they are potent enough to cause physical side effects. However, they are not to be confused with reality-based experiences. Experiences of the imagination can be confusing and sometimes blur the boundaries between it and reality, in particular when the person experiencing them is unsure about what constitutes each.
visit of Christmas past. I am here to show you the things that have been. Look back beyond.
As a consequence, this often leads to claims of supernatural experiences. That is, the person may be convinced the experience of fairies, demons, angels, devils, and gods are real experiences because of the physical sensations accompanying them. It was shown how such experiences in fact originate in the sense of imagination, and are therefore imaginary. We also defined the concept of truth to be used for ideas and concepts that find their match in the physical world. We discussed the difference between objective and subjective truth, and how the concept is abused by the world's religions to make assertions that are unfalsifiable, because they are purely the figment of people's imagination. Finally, we defined the concept of falsifiability as the property of a statement that makes it possible to determine whether it is true or false. Falsifiable statements necessarily refer to reality only, since their truthfulness can only be confirmed using real and observable evidence. From a scientific standpoint, we come to the following conclusions. 1. Gods, devils, demons, angels, heaven and hell are not a part of reality. They are imaginary ideas, and just like ideas in science, are in the domain of the imagination until observable physical evidence is discovered to show otherwise. And no, ancient books, anecdotes, emotions, and commonly held beliefs do not qualify as evidence, even if every person on the planet holds those beliefs. Gravity is not a fact because it is written about in books or believed in by the masses, but because we can actually observe it in action. 2. There is no convincing evidence for life after death. Claiming this to be a fact is to mislead, and is a display of blatant dishonesty. People making such claims would better serve the uncritical believer by a display of humility regarding their knowledge. For instance, they should take up saying, "We believe there is life after death," and not, "There is life after death." Nobody knows the answer. The only thing known at this time is that our current evidence indicates that this is not the case. The evidence indicates we come into existence for a lifetime, and then go out of existence. Like a Japanese proverb says, "We are no more than candles burning in the wind." With a series of videos, I intend to investigate other aspects of religion and discuss issues the faithful avoid thinking about or are simply unaware of. I intend to ask many questions, and when possible will seek answers from people who are considered experts on the issues. The purpose of this, the first video of the series, was to get important definitions out of the way. The next video, Chapter 2, will explore the scientific method and what constitutes evidence. I hope you will join me on this journey. Perhaps you too will learn something new.